Well, welcome, Cheri. Thanks for coming today, and we get to talk about a subject that I think a lot of people have experienced, trauma. And Cheri is one of the top experts in this. She has a practice called A Place to Turn.
Correct.
Here in Westlake Village, right?
Right.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about you as a therapist?
Well, as a psychotherapist, I've been practicing about close to 40 years, and I have developed into a holistic practice, recognizing the mind, body, and spirit are all connected. And what happens, like today, with the brain, happens in the body. What happens in the body happens in the brain. And so really understanding all of how the miraculous way we work is really important. And so I use a variety of modalities, and I actually have evolved into understanding, that the healing really comes from the inside out. And my PhD is actually in hypnotherapy, because helping people tap into their inner self so that they can explore the work they need to do instead of run away and look for the outside to rescue them. That doesn't really work. And so that became very foundational for me to explore that. And so through the years, in developing other modalities to create like a blueprint. Someone comes down and we pull out CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, eye movement, reprocessing, desensitization, I can't say it.
I know, I was just saying
desensitization, reprocessing therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
There is neurofeedback is, I recommend people to do that all the time. Then there is hypnotherapy, of course. There is, I probably can't remember them all, somatic therapy, and IFS, internal family systems therapy, and they're all tools.
Yeah.
Ketamine assisted therapy, they're all tools for us to discover ourselves. And so over time, we kind of develop like that blueprint of self-discovery and personal growth, and then hope for recovery, because we're built that way. We're built to go to sleep at night, have a day, go to sleep at night, and be reborn, and our bodies regenerate, our brains regenerate. And so if we could just get in sync with what already is, healing can happen.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of what trauma does, which you just said in so many of those type of therapies, is it affects the subconscious, right?
Yes.
So we're not even aware of it. We might think, no, I got through it. I dealt with that. I talked about it or something. But we're not even aware of it. I think from a neuroscience perspective, really kind of looking at the brain itself, what we see is it affects that inside layer of the brain called the limbic system, right? Which doesn't have the logic. It has the emotion, it has the survival instinct. It's what will help us when there's an emergency and we have to have that fighter instinct or flee from something. That's great for that. But it doesn't help us with understanding, with logic, and with feeling security. Really, right? And I think the limbic system, when we're in that limbic system, we feel insecure, and that robs us of happiness. It robs us of security. It robs us of feeling, the ability to thrive, really, in the future.
Correct.
So, so many of those therapies get at that, and I think with neurofeedback, generally we're pretty good at lowering some of the cognitive stress that happens on the outside of the brain and that cortex side, lowering that down or building up regions that maybe aren't strong enough for attention or sleep cycles or things like that. But we have one tool with alpha theta training, which we can kind of hit that limbic system. But I recommend people that have dealt with a lot of trauma to therapies like what you're talking about are really the core, because I think, as a neuroscientist, when I first started with this too, I thought this was the key to addiction. We just train these rhythms out. People then can have alcohol afterwards, have all these things and not have a problem. And for a couple of people, it went pretty well until they hit a problem in life, right?
Right.
And then they had no other coping mechanism.
Right.
They went right back to what they had really known in the past, because they didn't build up any other coping mechanism. They didn't learn really how the strategies of when life throws you crap, how to deal with it. And we can't control life around us. We can only control how we deal with it. And this is why I'm so excited about, you sharing on these therapies here, because people need this. I've learned very, very quickly, many, many years ago, that neurofeedback is not in any way the only tool. And it does a small part, right? Along with everything else. And that's where, really we need to talk about this stuff. And, the other thing, maybe you can address too, is a lot of people think of trauma as, oh, I grew up and I was abused constantly as a child, or I had this major thing happen or something. But trauma can be any time you don't feel secure for a long time, right? I talk about with kids with divorce, when their parents are going through divorce, and the kid doesn't know what's going on. Their cortex can't handle the problem. So now it goes to the limbic system and they're kind of on edge. And when that stays for years and years, right? If there's not security sometimes with finances and you're having to move from place to place, you might lose your house as a child especially, even bullying in school, right? You can't handle, it's not like you just use your cortex and we solve the solution or solve the problem. It stays in there. Or even, sometimes when people are in relationships to maybe a narcissist or something where you feel this sense, I'm just walking on eggshells around someone. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Right, and I think that, trauma can be the simplest things. They're finding studies that conditional development, everyday life can be how a person interprets it. A baby left in a crib, one baby, for 10 minutes long, considered too long. One baby will just play with a mobile and not even know there's time, because babies' brains don't really have time and space. Another will be crying and feel like, because there's no time and space, mom's never been here, maybe hasn't been here forever, and then the abandonment kicks in. And so there's no cognitive language then, and so there's a reaction. And some studies show that abandonment feelings is tied to addiction. And so so you're like, why can't I get over this addiction when you don't even know you're stuck in that freeze and mode. And so that is one example of everyday life. And if we can appreciate that we're going to interpret things and look for new ways to interpret things different, and always look for a 360-degree review, but we get stuck in this rigidity. That's what trauma is, black and white thinking. It creates rigidity because we're trying to compensate for loss of control to be in control. Our basic survival is safety, sense of safety, and we don't feel safe, then we're going to compensate. And we're going to use our energy to compensate with that and never feel safe, then we can't evolve into belonging and loving and self-actualization.
Purpose.
We can't grow.
Exactly.
Yes. And so people say, why can't I have purpose? Because they haven't addressed their unresolved what's called trauma, which could be traumatic big events or even small everyday distortions. And that's what's fascinating. And now an article came out from National Geographic that has confirmed that we carry trauma in our cells, in our DNA, multi-generational. So we could be carrying patterns that impact us that we don't even know. And people will say, I don't know where this is coming from, And so it's just fascinating. I don't think we even know yet how fascinating creatures we are.
Yeah, that's so true. I love how you talked about even like a baby, right? I always tell people, from a neuroscience perspective, a newborn baby, when they first come out, they have all their limbic system and hardly any cortex.
Right.
So all the survival instincts, that's why a baby can cry from day one, but they can't smile and have happiness.
Exactly.
That comes from building up the cortex and having a sense of control and feeling insecure, right? And so when a baby first cries, they're crying not just because they're hungry. They don't even know they're hungry. They're crying out of a sense of survival. I'm dying, Mom. Come do something, right? But then every time they cry, and the mom comes and feeds them, they cry, mom comes and feeds them, cry, mom comes and feeds them, it's establishing new connections in the cortex, these associations. They're saying, finally, after about 6 to 8 weeks or so of that, the baby will have enough connections in the cortex where they will, for the very first time, cry out of the cortex versus the limbic system, right? So instead of crying out of a sense of survival, they're crying out of the cortex, which is probably a sense of manipulation. Baby might not even be hungry. They're just going to test this little theory out and see if mom comes running, right? But when they do, and the baby smiles for the first time, most moms think, oh, they recognize me, they're smiling. It's much bigger than that. They have a sense of control over themselves. For the first time in their life, they've moved a little bit out of their limbic system into the cortex, and they have a sense of control. When I feel this pain in my stomach, I make this little sound, and the problem's taken care of.
Yes.
Now that's a huge thing. And really, going from an infant to a toddler is really moving from your limbic system to your cortex.
Right.
And that's why the toddlers are known for being so manipulative. That's because they're in the cortex. That's actually a good developmental stage to have manipulation. That's better than being stuck in survival. But if someone neglects that baby and does not come, now I'm not talking you have to be there instantly for the baby.
Exactly.
But I'm talking about over time, the baby continues to cry and cry and cry and is not taken care of. Then the baby will not create those connections, and they start to overgrow their limbic system, which now stays. A lot of studies show that it stays for the rest of their life. They're going to be battling that as well. So it's so interesting, and we talk about from kids and babies, but adults have the same thing.
Yes.
Right. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So what happens is trauma changes the brain.
Right.
It just does, and so it doesn't matter what age we are, and so recognizing, and it does matter when it happens in our lives. So as adults, it really does impact our cortex. Mm-hmm. It can shut it down. Therefore, our executive functioning can shut down that we're used to. So then it's like, I'm not my same person, and then that scares us because now we don't know who we are, and so and we can't access it because we are. That's kind of shut that down, and then to compensate, we don't usually go to the limbic brain as much as we go to the emotional brain. Shut down the emotions, shut down or increase the emotions. We're overreactive, underreactive, and you see that in the brain a lot. And so we're hyper aroused, and we don't know how to manage ourselves, which then is going to create that safety issue that will tap into the limbic brain of freezing or fighting or flighting, because now we're back on survival mode.
Panic attacks.
Yes, panic attacks, anxiety, depression is collapsing. We just faint or we just collapse, and so that's it's all tied into how to manage through the brain and the nervous system connected.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how cognitive behavioral therapy tries to get the cortex back online.
Yes. Right. So the first thing is knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. So as we talk through this and do some psychoeducation about the brain, there is a relief like, oh, this isn't, I'm not doing this, my brain actually is a pretty fantastic machine and is managing things. I just need to get it rewired. And then we address the beliefs that get formed when our brain shuts down and we go in that fight and flight or mode, or are we just over emotional? So all of a sudden, I am not safe is a faulty belief. I should know better. Maybe a faulty belief. I am in control. I am, I am powerless. All these negative cognitions that cause our behaviors to lock the door 3 times now. But before we only locked it once. We can't sleep. Because then sleep adds another deterioration. So then we talk about how the nervous system impacts the body, how lack of sleep impacts the body, how diet impacts the body. So because we tend to all those deteriorate simultaneously, unfortunately, a lot of times when we get depressed or we're anxious or and have panic attacks. Panic attacks make you feel like you're going crazy.
Right.
And so then you think you're going insane. You really do. And so we try to educate what a panic attack is. That helps them. We identify what belief system do you really want to have.
Right.
And with adults, it's like you had this before. It's like we can remember, because when you're in those new states, you don't remember.
Right.
It's like your memory gets fogged. It's like fog brain, and you really don't remember. And then when your brain, the neuroplasticity in the negative direction happened, you can't access it now. Now you can't find the wiring.
Right. Feelings take over.
Yes.
Right.
Feelings
How I
take over.
feel becomes the truth.
Yes.
Versus what I know.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Because I can't access what I know anymore.
Right. Exactly. And I love what you talked about with the beliefs that we create in ourselves, because those beliefs can destroy us.
Yes.
Or they can make us so successful.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, depending on where that is, and I mean, we don't have time to go into it now, but I think even from a spiritual perspective, those beliefs can, tear you away from the spiritual side, or they can lead you more towards it and stuff too. And, and stuff. So that's so important. And, one thing, I talk to so many people about, and just, I love the therapy itself, is EMDR. Why don't you tell us kind of what that is? You're professional in this, have done this for a long time.
So how I explain usually EMDR is that by the time our brain is shut down, and what happens is it's very smart. We have our brain actually, this is my basic way. You can help me. You have the limbic brain, and it kind of travels to the emotional brain and travels to the prefrontal cortex, and this is like one funnel. It's smooth. when something happens in the day and we experience stress, anxiety, depression, we go to sleep at night, we get 2 hours of REM sleep, which is like windshield wipers, wiping out the clean of the anxiety and depression. And so we wake up, we're reborn again, we start again. But what happens is we may not have we have a sleepless night, so we missed our REM sleep, so we carry the remnants of the anxiety, depression. The tragedy is bigger than 2 hours, and so we don't process enough. So we're not reborn. We wake up with this, like with a hangover, and so how our brain does is it's like scar tissue. And so the brain is really smart. So it will like, oh, I'll rewire. I'll go around the scar tissue, and we go down. And then it's like, oh, rewire again. And pretty soon we have a whole nother funnel. We're going down a whole nother funnel, and we've lost this access. And so with EMDR, we engage the brain, and we use what it already uses, and that is binary movement. And so you can use all these. You can make rapid eye happen. You can do the ears. You can tap. There's a lot of lights. There's a lot of modalities used to help engage that binary movement, so the brain starts cleaning out the scar tissue, and we identify, what the trauma belief surfaced, which usually is a negative cognition. I am ugly. And so we identify that memory to take someone deep into that memory, so they can feel a disturbance, because a lot of people will like numb themselves out. We don't like pain, right? But unfortunately, sometimes we need to sit in the pain to be able, as a starting moment, to move through it and realize, oh, I can move through this. Right. This isn't paralyzing me. This isn't scaring me. This is not uncomfortable, but I can move through it and clean it out, and I can remember I am beautiful, and this is why I'm beautiful. And so we measure, it's all measured. So you don't, you somatically, as well as what you think, as what you feel, so that you can walk away knowing I am beautiful, and remembering I am beautiful, because we remember everything. It's all there, but we block it off. And so science shown the results, it works. If you ask science how it works, they cannot tell you. It's because it really is a miracle of the brain doing the job. What it always done is the organically way it works. Right.
That's so true. And, we always find out later how it works. But, it's funny because a lot of people are like, well, that can't be sciencing, because if you can't explain it. Do you know most of the medications, we can't explain how they work at all?
Right.
We don't know the mechanisms of what they work. We thought that, SSRIs, started increasing the serotonin stuff. Now we're finding out that the actual mechanism is actually more anti-inflammatory than we thought. We always knew it worked.
Right.
But we were wrong how we thought it worked, right?
Exactly.
And so that is, I think, part of anything, is that we don't have to know exactly the mechanism of how things work to have them, the outcome is the most important.
Exactly.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about hypnotherapy and how that works too.
So I love hypnotherapy. I've actually had one of the, trauma experts tell me that it's, it is the best modality, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the patience to access it. And so because when I went to EMDR, I thought, okay, this is just another hypnotherapy technique, but the studies actually show the brain waves are completely different during EMDR as they are in hypnotherapy. So hypnotherapy allows us, to access, the 93% of our brain that we don't use, and it goes into, past that critical area that we think protects us, and past what we always use to something we don't access all the time, that inner intelligence, and be able to revisit, if you need to, these traumatic experiences in a safe environment, and rewrite the story as that works for you, and also gain insight, because the intelligence insight of the whole picture of the trauma or the unresolved loss or grief.
Is it rewriting from a subconscious standpoint?
It's not even rewriting. It's almost getting to the truth, and then rewiring to what goes with that, your personal truth. And so no one's programming you. You're like, you're accessing that. That's how I work with hypnotherapy. So you access your truth and you get the full story. It's like, because we distort truth, we distort reality. When we do a trauma, we remember bits and pieces of it, and we put together usually a horrible picture, and that we have no control, and that there's no safety valve, and so then you get that greater insight. Like sometimes it's a very spiritual experience. It's like you see a bigger picture here, and it's like, and they're like, I survived that. You know, like, that's pretty miraculous. I survived that, and I used this A, B, and C about me to survive that. And that wasn't about me, that was about them, you know, and that was an incident, not my life. You know, these are the kind of epiphanies they get that they can't access when their prefrontal cortex is gone.
No, I love that. You know, again, we do something called alpha theta, which is, you know, again, one tool that, you know, kind of, in some ways it kind of is probably a little bit more towards the hypnotherapy, as far as what you're saying, as far as it's allowing them to get in a state where things come out of that whole emotional type system and stuff. And I've had so many people say, you know, they said they had, you know, memories of the abuse they had as a child. But when you get that out of that subconscious side, and it's up to the cortex where you can make rational sense of it, it is a cool thing, because I've had some people come out feeling like empowered, like, you know what, my parents did this to me, and I survived. God has a purpose for me. I can now, I've had some people go into ministries where they're helping people that have been abused because of that now. They have more empathy for them. But it is a sense of empowerment versus a victim.
Exactly.
Right? That I survived this, and there's a reason, there's something good that can come out of it. I don't want to say there's a reason for what happened, but there's something good that could come out of the evil that happened.
And what you said about empathy, I love that, because a lot of times they come out and they have self-empathy and that self-compassion versus self-hatred and loathing. And that's such a phenomenal breakthrough for them. And so that's where they can, because we only give what we have. So we have self-hatred. How are we going to give someone else empathy?
Exactly.
You know, we do try a lot, but it doesn't really resonate, because we're all balls of energy. So subconsciously we all pick up each other, and we think, like, why isn't this working? Because we're trying to work from a broken prefrontal cortex.
Right. Yeah, it's so funny on the balls of energy. I think as a pure scientist, probably even 15 years ago, you know, I was working with this one group, and with HeartMath, if you've heard of them.
I love HeartMath.
And so I was up at their main center with some of the founders and stuff, and you know, they're all talking about this energy and how it can be, and you know, we sit together at first and kind of transfer energy between each other and stuff, and I'm probably the doubting Thomas in this, right? Because I'm like, but they brought out measurements and actually scientific tools that can measure your actual rhythm from your heart and the electricity being produced from your heart, and how it extends for 3-4 feet. Some people would say a lot further, but you can at least measure it from that level. And it is amazing how, you know, and you know, you do talk about how women, when a lot of, you know, women are together, their cycles start to resonate with each other, right? Which is, without that energy source, I don't know how you could actually say scientifically how that works. But, you know, they showed me scientifically how, when you're calm and you're resonating the right, you know, coherence and stuff, how that affects the person next to you, right?
Yes.
And, you know, and I think that's one of the problems, you know, again, not to open up a huge door, but in our culture where we're always on Zoom, we're always on social media, and we're saying things, we're not resonating with people.
Right.
If I have a disagreement with someone that I don't respect their view, but when I'm close to them, it's a totally different thing than when I can throw out on Twitter, right? I can feel them as a person. I can talk to them. I can start to understand their view. They understand that I'm calming down, so they calm down, and you have these rational discussions with people versus just, I think this disconnected culture we have really gets us away from that.
It really does.
You know, and there's no connection to people anymore.
Right.
I think that's again a whole nother subject. One thing I do want to talk to you, though, I've got you here, is ketamine assisted therapy.
Yes.
Kind of explain how that works.
I love ketamine assisted therapy, so it's my passion right now. The ketamine assisted therapy, low doses of ketamine in a safe setting with integration. On the ketamine, your brain kind of gets spongy again, like a baby's brain, and so that it's highly neuroplastic, so you can navigate to gaining healing by understanding. You go in with an intention by understanding again that greater picture. I think it's a cheater's way to go into a deep state of hypnosis.
Yeah, right.
That's how
which is great.
Right,
it's not really cheating. It's excellent. Right?
Yeah, because a lot of people can't access it on their own, because especially when you're trauma, you're hyper aroused, so you won't relax.
Exactly.
And the more you relax when you're in a high state of trauma, the more anxious you get.
Right.
It does the opposite effect.
Right.
So breath work, it does the opposite effect. You start hyperventilating.
Yep.
So the ketamine kind of takes you there, and then once you're there, you're able to access like the memories without the emotional reaction. Like you're not, and even if it gets a little scary, it's like you're able to stay there and go through the fear. And then when you have to be able to integrate the messages, because a lot of times, sometimes they're symbolic, sometimes they're nonverbal, they're like colors, and sometimes they're very concrete. But when you navigate through it, like the client can replay the new story.
Right.
They rewrite it right in front of me, and it's just so miraculously healing.
Yeah.
And so the challenge is, with so far with ketamine, they want to be 6 to 10 sessions for the neuroplasticity to stick. One session, someone can walk out and feel like anxiety free, just like that, depression free, just like that. But then you can your brain kind of reverse until it builds muscles. It's like building a new muscle, and that's why the 6 to 8 sessions helps the muscle develop, and as you continue working on the intention. But it's people. I've worked with people, some years and years, and then I expose them to ketamine therapy, and we do like 10 years of therapy one session. It's like we're both looking at each other. Both our eyes are like coming out of our sockets, like we're amazed. And yes, the foundation. I think foundation was there, but there's still it's such a great medicine.
I love it. And I love that you said it's use ketamine as therapy, right? It's still the therapy.
Yes.
A lot of times people are trying to use ketamine by itself,
which is dangerous.
And it doesn't usually stick.
No,
because you're lowering the rigidity of the brain. I usually describe to people as the cortex outside layer. A lot of times when we have trauma, it develops a lot of anxiety and stress to keep you so distracted that you never access that, right?
Exactly.
If I can stay a workaholic, if I can stay stressed and angry and all these things, I never have to deal with my trauma. It's I never have to even go there. So it's almost like building a wall around this trauma, right? And I think that a lot of times when people try and access that and that wall is still there, through regular therapy, talk therapy, even through neurofeedback, sometimes we see it's just not breaking through. It's not coming down because they have that. And so there's been a number of times where I've had people go do, some ketamine with a neuroprofessional, and then right after that even do some neurofeedback.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I've done that too.
Because it breaks down the wall, and so now we can get in there and start the healing process.
Yes.
Which is a great thing. I think that the combination for trauma, I am a firm believer that you need, neurofeedback sometimes and always therapy with it.
Yes.
Because there's always things where you have to work through and retrain. You have from a subconscious standpoint, your brain is going in the wrong direction, and if you want to try and go the right direction, that's like having your udder on your boat your rudder going one way, and you're just trying to go the other way, right? You can't do it.
Right.
I think that the combination. That's why I love having you here and love talking about this, because there's so many great therapies out there.
Yes.
And I think that when we start combining them, I think from a neuroscience perspective, what I'm always trying to do, and that's why I love working with people like you and stuff too, is from a brain map, try and get like a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on in the brain, and then we can from there kind of push people to the right direction. Hey, based on this, you're going to need therapy. Based on this, I see so much activity here. We're going to probably need some ketamine assisted to break through that. Based on this, we might need some EMDR. Based on this, we can combine. Maybe we start with some neurofeedback. I've seen a lot of people, start with some neurofeedback, then they can do EMDR to a certain level, and they're like, oh, it helps so much. But then towards the very end, it stopped, and I couldn't go further, right, with it. And then some things like maybe hypnotherapy or alpha theta therapies and stuff, or ketamine can maybe get them in that last little bit that they're just unable to access.
Exactly.
So,
and what I love about neurofeedback is that it does provide a visual map, and so it helps the client understand what my brain's doing. Because when we tell them, it's like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
you know, and so, but being able to
Yeah.
see it and then see their brain make movement,
Yeah.
I think that's, again, information is power. It just really helps them and understand why they're doing that modality and
love
to
it.
support it. So,
Well, thank you so much for coming here today. I think so
Yes.
many people are going to be helped just understanding, because so many people, they don't know what these therapies are
Right,
and
right.
stuff. And so tell us a little bit about your practice, where you're located, and
Okay.
website if you have it.
it's a place to turn. I'm located here in Westlake Village,
Perfect.
and you can find us at aplacetoturn.com, and that's probably the easiest way. I am the clinical director. I do all these therapies that you talk about, as well as train my clinicians, and we have clinicians here in Westlake, Pasadena, as well as Beverly Hills, and we make sure they're all, I'm trained to deal with complex trauma, and we'll use the variety of, meet the client where they're at. And that's what we're about.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you.